Hello and welcome to Digi8.com. In this video, we are going to cover the topic on change management. Now let's start with the definition of change management. The procedure and system that a company follows to express and execute changes in processes, both external and internal, is known as change management. Change management is a practice that directs how companies support, facilitate, and prepare their employees to embrace change and help the company succeed. It is a cumulative term for methods to prepare, assist, and aid people, companies, and teams to drive administrative change. Many degrees of cooperation are necessary for change management that may include various independent bodies in a company, or I would say departments in a company. Moving on to drivers of change. First, ongoing technological advancement in the industry. Next, internal evaluation of processes, maybe a response to crisis, changes in the demands of customers entailing change across the company, cutthroat pressure from the competition, merger and acquisition bringing about a whole change, restructuring of companies, and sometimes constantly advancing business environment due to globalization. Moving on, how to implement change management. First, explain the change among the employees in the company. Next, choose a team responsible for change management. Third, recognize sponsorship for management and ensure commitment. Fourth, create plans for executing the change that consists of metrics. Next, execute the changes in phases if the situation allows. Next, gather and examine data. Next, measure gaps and recognize resistance. And finally, make the changes to the plan as required and start from the execution phase again. Moving on to the types of organizational change. There are three types. First, transitional change. The changes that executives at high level or project managers execute to change the path of a company to ensure that the issues faced by it are resolved are transitional changes. Next, developmental change. To ensure optimization and development of processes that are already initiated, sometimes changes are implemented in a company's policy or project development processes. And finally, transformational change. Since they transform the primary concepts of a company, their fundamental values, and their operations, transformational changes are the most effective type of change. Next, what are the 7 R's of change management? The following are the 7 essential questions in change management checklist, also known as 7 R's of change management. First, reason for the change. Second, risk associated with the change that is requested. Third, required resources needed to execute the change. Fourth, the change was raised by whom? Fifth, the needed returns from the change. Next, person responsible for the execution, testing, and creating the change. And finally, relationship among other and the suggested changes. Moving on to John Kotter's 8-step process for leading change. Dr. John P. Kotter, the Konosk-Masuishita Professor of Leadership and Emeritus at the Harvard Business School, invented the 8-step process for leading change. These entail: first, create a sense of urgency. Second, build a guiding coalition. Third, form a strategic vision and initiatives. Fourth, enlist a volunteer army. Fifth, enable action by removing barriers. Sixth, generate short-term wins. Next, sustain acceleration. And finally, institute change. Moving on to factors of successful change management. Quantifiable stakeholder goals must be established and a business case related to its attainment must be created and updated regularly. Cost, cultural problems, risk, investment returns, dependencies, presumptions, and disbenefits must be kept an eye on. Communication that is successful in informing the shareholders about the causes for the change must be adopted. A successful scheme for improving skills, training, and/or education must be created for the company. The employees of the organization who resist the change must be redirected and oriented towards the company's strategies in contrary to their resistance. The fear associated with change must be reduced by arranging personal counseling if needed. The execution must be observed and changes must be made whenever needed. Moving on to the reasons for failure. When the problem that needs the change is not entirely comprehended before seeking a solution. Next, it could be hurrying to resolve the problem. Third, when styles and people that are part of the change are not systematically evaluated. Next, when the solutions that are suggested are not validated. Next, when the reasons for the change along with the change itself is not communicated. And when quantifiable waypoints and results are not established. Next, challenges to change management in a company. These entail 3 broad challenges. First, the issue of integration. Conventionally, the probability of change being executed through technology and infrastructure's role is looked over by the organizational development departments. Integration or orientation between the technical, social, and tactical constituents need people with varying sets of skill to collaborate. Next, the aspect of navigation. Constant adaptation is needed to govern change over a span of time. This is called navigation. It calls for one to administer a project with changing circumstances ranging from marketplace volatility to inter-organizational competence. And finally, human factors. People tend to be inactive, which is one of the main disruptions of change management. Besides, it can be humiliating for executives or managers to consider themselves a significant part of the issue when the company experiences loss of wealth. And finally, let's look at some examples of failed merger and acquisitions, thus entailing a failed change management process. First, Sprint and Nextel. In 2005, Nextel and Sprint failed to integrate. Some examples of the cultural issues faced were the employees of Nextel feeling suffocated with the leaders of Sprint due to distrust. Apart from that, very little time was allocated to business-related innovation since most of the time was spent trying to integrate cultures ineffectively. Next, America Online and Time Warner. Without understanding how new media works, the managers associated with this deal jumped to getting involved in new media. The risk of participants overpaying without understanding the landscape was very real. A loss of $99 billion was reported the year following the deal, which was the biggest ever annual net loss announced. Next, Daimler-Benz and Chrysler. According to a few segments, these two cultures vary too much to integrate. Daimler-Benz made decisions methodologically, whereas the decision-making process was unstructured and creative at Chrysler. Unlike Chrysler, Daimler-Benz had orthodox salary structures. Daimler-Benz followed a top-down structure, whereas Chrysler followed a flat hierarchy. Finally, 80% of Chrysler was sold for $7 billion by Daimler to Cerberus Capital Management in a decade. And the final example of eBay and Skype. Theoretically, this was supposed to make the communication and transaction flow easier between sellers and buyers, leading them to more revenue generation. eBay did not take into consideration that people prefer emailing unknown people about their transactions rather than talking to them directly. Within 4 years, 2/3 of Skype was sold by eBay for about $1.9 billion after they realized that the acquisition was unnecessary. So that's it, folks. This brings an end to the topic on change management. These are some of the sources and links referred to for the content in the video.
Thank you and see you in the next video.